there's really no fighting in the center. So basically, you pretty much covered it, that there's the external borderlands, which are in the vicinity. Of course, I'm on the other operating system where I can't access the notes that I had for this conversation. But where there's those borderlands, and it's just in the center, you have equilibrium of mind and body, where what you call that is a spiritual realm, where the body and the mind are the same. You get it? They're glowing, spiritual, mental, physical beings that are just as much a thought as it is a thing, a mechanical animal body. And that's actually closer to God, or the God form, because it's neither one or the other. It's combined into this this idea thing that encompasses both in this type of perfect balance. And if you're perfectly balanced between mind and physicality, then when do you die? Do you run out of vitamin C? Do you get real bored? If you're perfectly balanced, you could live forever. You could never run out. That's the whole point. Nothing's going to do that. But then the point, and on the side note, is going through the journey is that's the effect of going in, is being primarily physicality with a keystone or a headstone, capstone of mind. That's where the ratio goes back to an equilibrium. And if anyone's gripping too much one way or the other, that's where problems begin. We were told that you can't bring food and water once you enter this beginning, basically the mouth of the portal. Once you enter into the what you call the vaginal opening, the portal or realm, when you enter that, you can't have food or water. Which I thought was like, okay, well, this is just another test where they're just going to kill us. That's what happens. We're supposed to go in there and starve to death, and they're going to be like, we got you. But apparently that's how it works, and it has something to do with the biology and the in and out of the mind, to the point where if you begin to interact with yourself in a physical, biological manner, it kind of calls up these commands as if it's like a computational system that instigates or provokes like a role playing, an avatar set, like a command set of the biological system, where it's primarily, as humans from the borderlands, we're supposed to be dropping away from the physical or rising up through it, and our mind is supposed to be getting exalted and pumped up as the physical kind of shrinks down because we're overly physical. And so attempting to guide ourselves in those ways, whether it's a food or a band-aid or something like that, it's grabbing onto the physical as it's supposed to be letting go. And if we're holding on like this and the round makes it dissolve or rip away, that can cause reverberations or ripples through the mind to the point where basically it kills certain people if they're not prepared for it, and that's one of the main things that happens. And so obviously take food and water, but if there's a big swirling portal or a cave that you see the light rippling and shimmering, and it's like, well, you step in and it's like you start to feel like time's changing or something, you step out and it's back to normal, that's the area where there's no food or water, because basically it turns your body into an animal, or it rots inside of you, or something real weird like that. I'm not going to really say anything else because this is what it is, and if you are close enough, there will be somebody sent to guide you to let you know if your heart is pure. If not, they'll basically just, like, people who go with guns and just attempting to, like, take over, they basically just, their skeletons end up in the caves, and that's that. A fallen entity, if you will, these mutated forms, they can't get close enough because the magnetic fields push them back. In other words, they're polarized towards one or the other, and they'll either get dragged out or they'll get stuck to the outer wall. I mean, the inner outer wall. And this has to do with what I was saying before I went on the side thing about the tunnel, which is that, you have the inner area, and then you have, for the inner area, this is the borderlands. Like, we're in the outer hell, we're in hell for the inner, compared by the inner area to the inner area. So for this area, hell is the borderlands out where basically there's an ice wall or whatever's out there, where there's the military guarding the entrance and exit to this ring, if you will. This ring, which is pretty much like Atlantis, if Atlantis expanded and now everyone got stuck in the middle, and before there was actually 3 rings, an inner, outer, and a center, or however you want to look at it. And so the idea is that out there it's not cold and space, okay, it's the stuff of nightmares. It's where there's more disease, more physicality, there's a greater distance between mind and physicality. Polarity increases. And so you get these, what people term demonic, but that's incorrect usage of the word, but you could call it that, where they're fallen entities, where their genetics and their mind has mutated to the point where they can't encompass non-dual or compassionate experience or internalizations of self. They're because it's like a role-playing game we're all playing. Their role has to be geared towards the lowest amount of efficiency in terms of what one desires and wants in relation to the whole. Meaning they're like free agents, but they don't synchronize with a central, gravitationally, mentally central idea, which would be compassion and the promotion of life principles. It's basically anti-life, anti-Christ, anti-human principles. And it's just like saying we have a camp, and then on the outside of the camp, there's, wild animals and thieves and rapists and vampires and things like that. The borderland to this realm is that. And that's, you could also say, that's what they're protecting. They're not keeping people in, they're keeping that out from coming into this realm. And it's all one and the same. But the idea is then, this realm is that for the inside, to the point where everything's pure to the level of efficiency and self-awareness. Everything is on a measurement, on a scale of self-awareness. That's all it is. It's not like, you pay $2, you get $2 worth of stuff. It's you put $2 or 2 moments worth of effort and awareness in, and you yield that in experience. Out here, it's much more degraded. Some people put years worth of effort in and don't get shit back because of the way the system has been controlled and designed and mapped out by these systems that are basically filtering and taxing all the energy coming in and all the energy coming out. The point is, the borderlands out there desire to take humans places in here and basically subjugate and enslave humanity. On the inside, it's, what we call a paradise, but it just means it's a higher level of intelligence so people don't hit each other in the face with hammers. And so then the goal for people who can want to control here and are more or less stuck here, because there's a magnetic, you have to have a non-dual polarity and non-polarity in order to go through the magnetic field. Otherwise, it sucks you in one direction or the other. And the idea, so they just want to distract people and stop people. The other thing is, free will is law. And so, in that sense, if a person wants to move in a non-dual polarity, all they can do is offer temptation to knock them off. But they can't actually move in with a tank and shoot somebody with a polarity gun. It doesn't work that way. They can beam them very gently and then upping it unless they resist that and inform them, stop, I see what you're doing, claim their independence, their sovereignty, and don't engage anymore. But if nobody does that, then it's just like a game. It's like a little kid with a spitball or something, and that's how they view it. But as well, what goes on in the borderlands is just like animals in an interdimensional level of just, hell, horror. And as well, that goes on underground in those lands. But the idea is, it's literally like a hurricane, where you have a magnetic flux, an anomaly going around the outside. In the center, there's the actual anomaly, where there's a vortex point of stillness. There's non-duality. There's no polarization. People were in the non-polarized area before because that's the creation point. Nothing is born on the outside of the creation point. You said it in your last video, I think the question and answers, which is, people weren't kicked out. Somebody came up with the idea that was polarized, and it caught on, and those who saw the idea and were like, no, that's not cool, they rode the wave and went up and stayed in the center. Those who saw the idea and were like, it influenced them, they didn't reject it or not reject it, it changed them, they were riding the wave of that idea, and in that sense they became polarized and engaged or attached to it, and it's as if there's velocity of magnetic flux moving at the speed of light around the vortex at all times. Only by being non-dual is that not affecting anyone. If somebody becomes polarized, then now all of a sudden, to the degree that they're off-center and polarized at this point, that field becomes relatively influential or effectual or affected, meaning it actually has an effect, it's real to them, it's manifested to them as a force, and it begins to have an effect. The idea is something moving at the speed of light, and the amount of what we call magnetic force that empowers the entire realm, the degree that we changed into polarity was the degree of force that shot us out from the center of that vortex into what are now known as the borderlands. And these are the inner borderlands to, this is land to us, or at least people that are here, but it's the borderlands to those from the center. And that was the beginning where people basically got shot out of this vortex and ended up over here. That's what has to be undone and reversed for somebody going back in. For somebody that's there now, if they were trying to leave, they wouldn't be able to leave, but if they were polarized enough temporarily by playing the game that's present here in this realm, then they could basically surf the energy waves out and end up on Earth 2 or 3, or whatever you want to call it. And so that has to be reversed in order to get back through that magnetic anomaly shield, basically, and return. Which is, again, if compassion is it's like the namesake or the centerpiece or I can't think of the words, I've been bad on words today. It's like the calling sign of non-duality, because only through true compassion and self-awareness can one actually see from a central or centralized centered point of view and basically see without bias. And if you're not biased, you're not reacting or rejecting or attaching to any of these polarized impressions. And they're polarized because the impression will either come from one person or another, and it will be biased towards having an influence or respect or viewing somebody in relation to the self in one way or another. But all that is based upon ego, and in that sense it's biased and polarized to a certain idea spectrum, like a reality schematic, where really it could be, you can't impress that upon another person, so the only true reality schematic is just freedom, liberation for any person to choose whatever they want. And so basically that's like the rundown of the kind of idea that I wanted to present to you, and that also the air does not have the same effect as tracking yourself step by step on this time scale that goes into a pinnacle, a convergence point where you meet in the center, because moving through the air doesn't have the capacity to synchronize you with the ground that's actually tracking the conversion point. It's like the ground ratio of conversion into that anomaly is not the same as the sky, at least from what I was told and what I experienced.
Right, because you're not touching Mother Earth, and that's where the magnetism is coming from. So if you're disconnected from that, then you'll kind of miss this shift you're talking about.
Right, you'll just be it'll be like the compass kind of just spinning. And that's the point, that it's very mundane, it's very scientific. They hit us over the head if you tell anyone about this, and so it's like everybody thinks it's fantasy, but being grounded to the source of the magnetic anomaly, that would make sense. Now you're making the circuit complete, and there's some type of exchange between your brain, your consciousness, your spirit, and the land that allows you to inch closer and closer to that anomaly center point. Which it seems like it's supposed to happen. There's a way to go in and a way to go out. And when you walk through this mentally, spiritually, physically, that there's a process that occurs. And I think that's the most difficult part beyond finding it, because it's literally like ego death. It's literally like dying. And that I've seen it. We've seen it. People from the projects went there. We saw it. It's basically like dying. That's why they killed us a bunch in the bases, because we couldn't go through these experiences without that. Although we could have, but they wouldn't be in control of it. Whereas they did this way, everything's 100% mapped out. It's honestly, it's just mapped out. I won't compare it because there's nothing to compare it to. It's not like a roller coaster or sex or a trip or something or a near-death experience. It's beyond all of that, because I sat there and told you, and I still say it might have been a simulation that they invented all this to trick us. But if it's not, then that was that. That was the inner city and the passageway through, which is, you know, I can talk to you about this because you've done so much research that well, shoot, either they broke into this place and put evidence and circumstantial evidence and stories and history and paintings everywhere throughout, and references throughout every nation, or people have known about this since the beginning, because that's probably where our civilization originated from.
Yeah, I definitely veer towards the second option. The media is giving us so many mixed signals when it comes to the North Pole, because on one hand you have this kind of obvious disclosure in Moana and Sausage Party, but then on the other hand you have Iron Sky 2, The Coming Race coming out, and that's about what we'd call Hollow Earth, and Hitler is there, and he's created an oppressive regime, and there's scary dinosaurs.
It's always
very
reversed.
strange.
It's always reversed. They're leaving you hints. This is the reversal. So what you see here in relation to the truth will be lies. And if you struck up a movie deal and you didn't put lies in it, you just plain out, they're going to cancel the movie. And that's how it works. It's never, you're going to have it in like a gas station for like $2 because they're not going to support it as well. If you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, it's because it has to be that way because that's the truth. If they told you the truth and we're in the land of lies, it would just be confusing. We're in the land of lies, keep lying and show the truth through the lies and keep everything legit. When we get to the center, it's just thousands upon thousands of years of absolute perfection and history of how things actually are, but keep that over there because what happens if we have that out here and now it's tainted? Would we have nothing on the inside or would we have both and then there's no distinction between them? The lies are out here and that way it keeps in this alternating pattern. And as well, they're putting the information in the movies, those are they're not like guessing when they're doing that. Those are the people who are actually involved. They're putting those hints out because that's their way of doing it. I was going to say something else. I can't remember though.
Right, but my question is there one prime goal? Are they trying to disclose this to those who are meant to go back to the center, and then they're mixing it with lies to muddy the waters, or is it just all over the place? They're just wanting tons of confusion about it.
All over the place is the truth. Because imagine this. They say, well, here's the truth. And they tell people, and they say, this is the future, this is the inner path. Here, all you chosen people, go get it. What would happen? Nobody would get there. Everybody would take it as a joke, or they would destroy it, and there would be a mass exodus of all the people, and the people whose hearts said, there must be gold there, there must be women there, beautiful women, there's huge strawberries, let's go wreck the place. And all you would have is the borderlands, Greenland, and then just skeletons of dead humans that tried to go and got stuck in that magnetic anomaly, and in 10 footsteps, they aged 10,000 years. Okay? So, you can't have the truth in this land. The truth is subjective in terms of how a person is capable of understanding that objective, eternal, external truth. The actual truth is one and all objective. But to each of us, how many people are smart? Well, it's everyone on their own. Are humans smart? There's a billion people, and they're all at different levels. The point is, when they put that stuff out, we're putting it out for a billion people to see. So you have the picture, then you have the highest truth, then you have the secondary degraded version, then you have the third level degraded version, then you have the fourth level degraded version that everyone sees. You have to go and decode and read between the lines and put the clues together and get to the ultimate truth that is sandwiched and packaged between all that information, because that's how this realm works. We're on the bottom of the pyramid, if you will, in this area. It's not society, it's not commoners, it's not white, black, Mexican, Asian, it's Earth 2 or 3 or whichever, depending on the scale you look at it. Some would say this is Earth 6, and that's the bottom of the pyramid. This realm is the bottom of the pyramid. So in that sense, you have to tell the truth. In telling the truth, you have to include all that noise, because then the people who are basically dumb or are from this place and cannot comprehend anything but this must attach to the outer view, and those who have the mind to see, they'll decode and see the higher view. The point is, like I said, well, why do that? Are they lying? Are they just trying to confuse people? Are they giving the truth, but it's like split up? If they gave just the plain truth, there's 10 lines of just, there's this, you are here, this is that, this is what you need to do. None of it would work. People would ruin it. They'd take it and chew it up and spit it out and crap all over it. And that would be what happened to the truth. So that's not the truth. Telling the truth isn't the truth in a land where people can't know, where people are stupid. And so, I don't want to be personal or insulting, but it's what's going on. It's just how things are in this place. And
right. So this muddying of waters is really beneficial for those who should be truly going back to the origin point, because they can see past all of it, whereas the disharmonious content that's coming out is really a safeguard to kind of protect this realm.
Yes, and I'm not going to agree, but I'm not going to disagree. Because I'm not going to be the one that makes the videos and does all this. I don't do that. But if you're going to put it that way, I'd accept that over they're just trying to kill everybody because they don't want nobody to know. Because the truth is, what I do know, if you take everyone and you say, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, the moment they do that, we're done. You got to call a rescue crews to come in and grab all the people that are ready, okay, and beam us in. Because at that point, it's just going to be a free-for-all. No one's going to care. The people who aren't supposed to know will know, and it will degrade, and that pathway will go like this, and it will narrow and shut. And so by keeping it kind of plausibly deniable, the door's wide open and nobody knows. And so that's how it is. Basically, what I'm saying is that plausible deniability closes, and it's like, it is true, what are we going to do? And that ratio or opportunity of change and all that, and as well the vulnerability of that place goes up, they're going to shut the door. And we're going to get a little pinpoint that you can get through. It's already a pinpoint. It's already, a chasm that you have to find following your spiritual compass, okay, the needle of your mind and your heart combined in order to walk through the gate. It's already the eye of a needle. And so, yeah. In order to get the physical, your mind must be aligned. In order to align your mind, that needle is not a land you walk to. It's the thoughts and the direction that you choose that is not bounded, but motivated by your heart path. And that's the eye of the needle. It's a delicate, zero range where, like this, like there's a compass. Okay, well, when I'm doing this, someone's like saying align your mind and your heart as the same and let that be your spiritual compass. That's kind of like what this means to me. As well as there's energy channels that circulate, and you ground yourself basically when you do that, and you ground to the ground. But and that's the eye of the needle, not the land. This is just a holographic expression of the code your brain is running, basically your spiritual choices. The choice to do this, that's the eye of the needle. And you gotta look. Well, what do I mean by that? How many people out there eating McDonald's, watching music videos, driving their stinky cars, and trying to get more and more materials are going to stop within the next 10 years, if we're here for 10 years, okay, and go, I want to find an inward-facing portal to the source of all creation using my combination of my spiritual bodies to refine my mind and physical sense and basically allow my heart to envelop myself and my reality. How many people are going to do that? Probably not many, unless it becomes, they start to make people do it, basically. They put it in the media, they put it in here and that, and tell people to do it. The point is, if people are told, did they do it? No. That means an autonomous system that decided for them did it. And that means they didn't do it, and if somebody tells them to do it, it means they never get the chance to actually do it. That's what I said also about if they come out and tell people, well, now no one has the opportunity to find it, to be drawn to it, to uncover that on their own, and they ruin it for those who actually who came here to this place to undertake this journey and to figure it out on their own. That's why you can't tell anybody. You gotta let them find out on their own, and in that sense, they become like gods. They become with God in their own spiritual sense, and if you tell them, you take that away from them. I don't like talking like this, but in the highest end of it, if we are gods, then they're not torturing people and lying to people. They're letting them figure out the truth on their own. And if it turns out the whole world blows up and we all teleport into the center and it's like, wow, that was a great game. When are we going to do that again? And like 10 people are like, we're not doing this again, at least for another 50 years until everyone's trained and you get your rescue button devices activated so that next time something goes wrong, you can just extract yourself automatically, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that this whole thing was just one big dream collective game we involved ourselves in. Then I'll say, all right, they're not torturing people, we're all gods. I kind of feel that anyway because I value myself. I've been through so much where I thought I was going to die, it was over, and here I am. So I'm not going to say for other people, but for myself, I know that everything that's terrible that's being done is to push us, whether they actually want to push us or whether they're simply evil or out of sync, missing the mark in sin, and are simply unaware of that overall non-polarized, unified aspect, and they're intending to hurt us, but still, being natural, fragments of God in ourselves, if you have yourself if you're not attaching to it and you're using everything to learn more, then it just polarizes, or it just motivates you and pushes you further to the truth. And in that sense, even if they actually mean to be wrong, and it's not like, well, we're not being evil, we're just torturing you to get you strong and to, we're raping you so that you know about sex and stuff like that. Okay, even if they're insane and they know it's wrong, the point is, it still just pushes us to be basically more aware and more powerful, because we can't actually die. We're spiritual entities or spiritual beings anyway. But I'm not going to sit there and say that they're, like Boy Scouts ruling the world in this way just to teach people the truth. But the system's set up so that if you want to know the truth, anything that happens to you pushes you closer to the truth. They're building what they're doing in a spiritual essence because they understand the ins and the outs, and they're coming from a balanced perspective, but they're handling everybody through a polarized means to keep them more or less under control. And you could say in the same sense, they're from the inside and they're blocking people from getting back that aren't smart enough and aren't balanced enough to ascertain the truth and merge with this totally honest and truthful society. Just imagine, what if everyone was teleported there right now? We'd have trash lining the streets, there'd be cars, everything would start blowing up immediately if everybody was there. So it sounds elitist, it sounds almost disgusting, but I don't like going around and seeing trash everywhere. I don't like going around and seeing destruction of people, their own flesh and their own mind. And I know that if that happened there, the whole universe would probably collapse. Everything would probably delete itself from all of time, because there's basically a management system beyond everything. And it's not going to press the button and say, you guys have to screw you. It would literally say, there's too many errors here and there's not enough defragmentation here to organize the structure on the inner and outer, and it would collapse and it would just wipe itself real quick and start over. And so I know that there has to be some form of elitism. The thing is, alright, well, it's because you got money and hoes and gold and bombs and you got your own army? Or is it because you have knowledge and compassion? That's the true elitist. Knowledge and compassion. And it's not elitist like they're better than you, but they're motivated and aligned towards their highest potential. That's the true elitist. And there are versions of that where they're just pretending. Because the whole thing about this place is agendas and deception. So everywhere you think you have the truth, you also have the imitation of it and somebody pretending. Where it accelerates and everything basically goes white knuckle tests of strength, power, nobility, and self-awareness, that's where the wheat and the chaff are separated and you really see whose true colors are what and who's who. But up until then, it's all just mixed in and nobody really knows. Everybody's wearing a mask, especially where money and power comes into play. And so it doesn't mean I really trust everyone, or especially everyone that's running the show, but there is a true version and there is a false version, and the true version can't be usurped. It can't be taken out. Their power can't be stolen. They're from the inner future realm that our society comes from. So nobody can actually take their power or stop it, but we're in this time delay gradient of distraction, and anything in between the A and B of the time delay is where we forget, and then we have to begin to reintegrate and re-remember who we are and where we're from. And we went so deep into a delay this time that it's literally been 1,000 to 10,000 years that we just forgot who we are, which means this is the darkest we've ever gone, the deepest we've gone into forgetting and dying, and as eternal beings who can't die, this is the closest we got to this illusion where we're pretending there's nothing but death here. Now, also, the other videos, the movies you mentioned about the inner earth, and I think the invasion of these other beings, okay, they're talking about the giants, the Nephilim. That, basically, if the realm is naturally shrinking and we have to be in an area that is prepared for extraction, or the innermost tunnels to the point where when that wave begins to crash and shrink the realm back up, then we have to be in that area. And it would seem as if then at that point, though, the realm shrinking you'd ride the wave back into the center. It would be like a reverse Armageddon or something, and we'd like get pushed by beams of light into the center. You know, like Yellow Rose of Texas talks about this, or Yellow Rose for Texas, when the only person, along with Chiron last, who doesn't talk about this directly but talks about it indirectly, who I was briefed on, and they're talking about this same exact event, which is basically where this is beginning for the masses. It's not just going to be a couple people that do this and then something else. If anyone does that, it starts a controlled time, like a schedule of events, a series of events that results in the entire realm returning back to the innermost land. And so that's what they're also trying to stop, but it can't be stopped. And in that sense, basically those who go from here to there are going to draw a pathway like a Christed path, where this land now has a synchronization tether, like you went from one to the other and you had a fishing line or a piece of twine, but it's that through consciousness and time that now opens up a temporal pathway between the inner land and the outer land and bridges that gap, pathway, that dimensional barrier. And if there's an actual living pathway between them, now there's communication between the two realms, and basically it would be the beginning of an ascension, or, you know, bad word, but more so a kind of return, a mass exodus, which is our minds basically realigning with where we were originally. And it's literally like a ticker that once it starts, once somebody achieves that task, nothing can stop it from happening once that begins and the series of events begins to interlock. It's like a computational system, or like the Mayan calendar. It's basically, it's shielded. Once somebody gets to the center, to get that, it rotates like an Indiana Jones map or something, and now there's a pathway open. Once that is open, there's going to be a beam of light or air or connection, whatever you want to call it, from that center point to the outermost point, and everything else is going to begin to solidify in correspondence with that, because that's going to be where most of the power in the realm is. There's not going to be anywhere in this realm that doesn't have more power than the pathway of the people who go from there to there into the center and unlock that time stream, that reality paradigm, whatever you want to call it. And as a result, everything in this realm is going to organize towards that. That's why they perform these events and rituals and these events basically that are touching on that without changing too much, because then they're dripping power, literally like squeezing it out of the tree, the sap, and drilling it into the core, and bringing power to themselves. It's etheric power to control, create, manifest, co-create reality. But the point is, if you did it and entered in with your body and mind, you have the power of the entire species in one, a group of people, and meaning your intentions to bring heaven on earth, etc., so on, would be the most powerful intentions in this plane at that point in time. And that would also leak out forward and backwards in time because of the way quantum engineering temporal non-duality works, which means that everything in history leads up to this event of liberation. And so it means if one person begins that means that everything before that is leading up to everything that is taking part in that. And it's the same thing for everyone, though, because everyone eventually takes that journey, but it's usually mentally, to the point where when you find liberation in your own life, everything that you lived before that, every choice you made, added up, led up to that one event in your life. So this is just what we're experiencing for our species now, because somebody figured out the secrets. Or they were helped. We were all helped.
And it's sort of like when you're going to the center, that change is so drastic, and that's reflective of such a shift in your own ability to eliminate duality, that instead of it being a small-scale domino effect, it's huge.
Right. It's like taking you had a bunch of little dominoes. It's just about the parts per whole. You got a bunch of little dominoes, and then you see some guy over there just waiting, and it's like, what is he doing? And he's just like pumping himself up, and he picks up this huge domino that's like this big and just like tosses it over, and like, that's not going to do anything, and it knocks over all the dominoes at once, and it changes the entire civilization. It changes his entire life. It changes his or her. It changes the family. Ultimately, when one person takes this and enters into that trajectory, their bloodline becomes tethered to a future civilization, basically. They all become immortal. Everyone that's connected to that DNA, because the DNA is a tether through time, through parallel realities, through parallel times. And so it's just like one big tug of war, one big dominoes, but everyone's trying to organize, link back up to the central creation point in the far future, in the far past, and in the far inner, and even in that sense in the far outer, but not the linear sense that we think. Because this is the far outer, and this is the far inner. Or this, America is, or not America, but like the ring, if you will, around South America and England and Africa, this is the far outer, and then the north is the far inner. There's like multiple parallels where it's inner outer here and inner outer there. But I think you get the idea. We were told there is more land than what we're told, and that the other land is basically controlled like a utopia that is managed by a central management system, and that there are no rules, but that means if you piss somebody off and somebody, wants to come back at you, then that's that, and that's what happens. It's kind of like Wild West with advanced technology, but as well, everyone basically develops truces so that nobody basically dies. And as well, everyone uses cloning and mind recordings and things like that to the point where nobody's actually capable of dying. You can't kill anyone because it doesn't work. And so nobody would waste their time. But and on top of that, then there's like gladiator battles and all types of crazy stuff. And they said there was islands basically around that are all over the place and that are basically bought out by trillionaires. And you can do whatever you want there, and no one knows about them. You're not allowed to fly anywhere near them. No one's allowed to talk about them. I mean, if you were somebody trying to just tell people and blow the whistle and be like, all right, everybody, let's go let's go crash this party of these rich people. I'm sure if I was like a millionaire and I was like, all right, we're going to go here, and there's a party there, and Osama bin Laden lives there, and Hussein and all that, we're going to go, I'm sure I would vaporize in the next hour. But the point is that there's supposed to be more land, and basically that we live in like the third or fourth layer society down, and it really has nothing to do with the government we see. Apparently there's like 5 constitutions, and the ones that we see have nothing to do with it. You basically wipe your butt with them. They have no bearing on reality. That's why the Constitution says this, this, and this, and no one listens to it. No one in power does anything that has anything to do with the Constitution at all. From privacy to control to regulation to bureaucracy, it's all some other schematic. And the schematic that's out here is ran in accordance to the one that's out there, which is basically very, very wealthy people. And again, I can't blame names or who's, not because I don't know, but because everyone that we see is a scapegoat. Everyone's a scapegoat, and in the same sense, when I've done it for 20 years, I blamed them and was like, you all did this, it's your fault, you made people stupid, so on and so forth. And usually they successfully showed me how if they didn't do certain things that they have done that I deem to be basically completely for their own care and so on and so forth, that it would be way, way worse, and it would basically be like a free-for-all. And everything that we have is based upon circumventing greater laws, which sounds terrible, and it's a very strange way to do things, but at least that's what I was shown and that's what I was told. To the point where some of these false flags, okay, well, they'll say, yeah, but if we didn't do this one where like 2 people died, okay, there would be this one and 50,000 people died at that one. So that's the basic idea of what the line of reasoning is. And again, I can't, confirm, but that's what I'm told, and that's why the cracked bureaucracy we have here being in accordance to the one they have over there, because it's either that or a free-for-all where we don't have the option to complain. More or less, if you can complain about how crappy it is, that means it's an illusion, and the crappy version we have now is not actually the crappy version. It's just a game. Which is disgusting, because it's like, well, you mean all the people that are like currently starving or burning and heating up in this other country? But again, I can't blame and say, well, for this action, it would be 10 times better if it was this way because I know, and you need to go to jail or something like that. I don't have the right to do that. I can just say what I've seen and that I did not agree. And I don't agree now, but I just don't not agree now. But I did not agree before, and voicing them was like, this is wrong because of this, and they showed me, and it's like, okay, well, y'all are obviously just making the the lesser of two evils, but it's still the lesser of two evils, and they're not the ones that started it. It's basically these other beings, these interdimensionals that come from the outer borderlands. And that gets weird in itself, but that's where these this closing of realms is introduced, and where we're going to have an exodus. We're going to have to return, because that's the only way to really survive and make sense of these things, and that's the only actual option. Everything that happens here, you throw a ball down the street, then something happens later on. It's like everything's degraded, slowed down, just inefficient here. So I can see how it's even darker out there, and it's basically operated and controlled by these entities, or these abstractions, and then on the inside it would be kind of like what people call heaven, or basically, for me, it's just another civilization, and its inside is as well spatial, but because we're in this magnetic flux, it's temporal, meaning you're going closer to the source of time, as if there's a source where time is pulsating out, which, unless you've had some of these experiences, doesn't really make sense, but it's kind of like looking at your mind. You can be out here, and here are your thoughts. They're coming out, and you're like, they're born, and then 2 seconds later, you see them, and you're reacting to them, you do things. Okay, imagine closing your consciousness down, not closing it, but refining it until you basically move closer and closer and closer to the inverse square source, where there's this central emanation point where your awareness is beaming outward from. It's as if the center of the realm is that for time and space, events of history in this environment. That there's a core where the beginning of time is taking place, just like you can it's the same thing as kind of being low awareness, not very, supra intelligent. I can't think of there's really no words for this, but you're kind of reacting to yourself, to your own thoughts. That doesn't really make sense. It's like you don't know what you're doing or what's going to come next, but you're the one that's creating what's happening next. How can you not know? But the point is, then you can refine and you kind of hone in your awareness as if you're turning back inward and seeing what's happening as it's happening, and in that sense, kind of before it happens. We can go to a central realm where there's a civilization that's doing that. In that case, everyone's mass consciousness is different in that place, and it's as if time and events occur according to a different schematic. And the whole point is that there's just more consciousness, meaning we have events in history here, we have trends and memes and awareness passing around a medium of consciousness, and it's very delayed here. If we were in a place closer to the center, it would be instantaneous. Somebody would have an idea, and the other person over there would have the idea, to the point where it would probably be like you could sense the idea in the air, and if I looked at you and went, and thought real hard, you'd look at me and be like, oh, well, you call or something like that. Like, there'd be telepathic cell phones, if you will, instead of what we have out here, which is either technology or just like dead-headedness, and we're kind of like psychically shut off. Basically, apparently the source is a psychic equilibrium, or a psychic it's like a density level where now our spiritual body is plugged into the aether instead of having just the air and light and visible spectrum to go off of. It's to the point where we're actually swimming through an electromagnetic spectrum of mind energy, and at that point you can program reality and make a little ball of, what is the answer to this, and send the question to somebody, and they'll wake up with that in their head and they'll know you sent it to them or something like that. So the dynamics change just because you change consciousness, you change the fundamental layering of reality, and all we're doing is taking the layers of the electromagnetic shield of your wavelengths coming out, and instead of very, thin between the crests or the wavelengths, we're shrinking the space between them, and it's more condensed, more thick, more denser amount of consciousness instead of empty space. Atoms, another way to look at it, atoms are 40% empty space instead of 90% or 99% empty space as they are out here. Kind of makes sense, but the point is you get these different results through that change everything. The center point and the actual fish itself, that could be possibly the polarium, to the point where they don't actually have a form. They don't have a one race or the other. They're simply the blueprint for all other races that are to come. And so then each light rung that goes down in each color that goes down is a different density, frequency, and color, and distance of proximity to the center is the different root races, to the point where you have, if you're going to use that schematic, the Hyperboreans next, and then the others, and so on and so forth. And then we're at like the third or fourth or sixth or whatever it is. I think we're the sixth, something like that.
We're the fifth.
Okay, they're fifth. And then there's supposed to be one more, and then the last, and then the first and the last are the only ones that actually exist. Meaning everything else is just a light on the jellyfish. There's only the jellyfish, and then maybe the organism that is birthed from the jellyfish after they're done creating their little light show. That one exists, and the beginning exists. The other ones, they're like dreamtime memories that are coming out into this existence, and it seems real, but as soon as the next one comes along, because this massive biotechnical creature that's pumping out time waves of reality, as soon as they move to the next idea, this will be just a memory, and the other one will exist, and the other one will take our place, and it will be what's really here the whole time. In the same sense, if we're advanced enough, we can jump from one rung to the next, and that's what these Theosophians, I can't think of the word, have figured out how to do, and they use various techniques and methods to contact, basically to move their consciousness and alter the frequency so they can contact the other rungs and the other races, if you will, as well as explorers and inventors and dreamers and so on. And so it gets weird because it means that each one is altered by frequency. The previous one, they're mind compared to us. But if you were at their level of frequency, meaning you used your mind to travel to that layer, they would be just as physically you. But this world would be kind of like the dream time at that point. And so then it gets weird because there are other beings, basically. Whether there's like a reptilian or a reptiloid race, or these, there's a few other races, like this is real weird, like atoms, and which is not exactly the same one, but it's connected because that whole Genesis story is about how the realm, basically it's the creation of the universe through these different realms, and it's actually the universe composed of smaller verses or realms within. It's never just like one thing. That's the whole point. You can't have one thing, but in that sense, that light show, that LED show, that's what's actually going on. And we're just one flash. Each, the whole civilization goes, there's a light, there's a flash, and then it drops to the next one. Just like an electron going through different valence levels. And so the point is, our eternity or our history is one flash as the light goes red or green or whatever it is, and then drops to the next one. We live entirely within that flash. And they're actually going like this. They're happening simultaneously to the point where they're all here now. If you could move your consciousness and change the angular momentum of your consciousness, you would be able to contact this other realm and see these other beings. And that's what a lot of these rituals are about, of changing the fundamental spectrum of the group's awareness and opening up an area, a central area that acts as a mini chasm or a mini portal and allows these other beings to come down. And they then set up a big game where the controllers are trying to basically create a war between them so they can profit off of it, which is horrible, but that's what they're doing. And in that sense, they're also trying to create the master race, because the master race is when whatever happens, happens, and then there's the next one. So all they're trying to do with that is just create as much catalyst, as much reactions, as whatever it takes until the next race comes around. And then they're trying to catch that race and be like, yo, we helped you out. We can give you these tickets to contact these other dimensions, blah, blah, blah. As long as you help us out, we'll help you out. And they're trying to basically be like the tourist guides for this interdimensional process, which is, one way or another, depending on how you live. Apparently there's a good group, or there's a group that wants to protect everything, and there's one that's just like, nothing's sacred, we can do whatever we want, screw you, we'll own you if we want to. And it's mainly that they're overtaken with the lower races that are basically animalistic, which is what it really is that their mind is impregnated and merged with a non-physical race, or a race that's non-physical to us and is on the farther, closer to the borderlands of reality, meaning they have less self-awareness and more automation and animalistic qualities. Basically, they're beasts in men suits. And the woman, the female form being closer to the nurture aspect of the entire system is very difficult to possess in that way, and that's why men are only allowed, women aren't allowed in that sense. It's a big show, it's a big vampire game they're playing, but that's what they're doing, and they're holding that as long as they go through with it, whoever survives will be the master race, because no other species will be able to compete with that. The human that makes it out and becomes that will be a superhuman. In the same sense, we kept the same forms. So say you have like a reptiloid race on the beginning one where it's basically animalistic and kind of warlike, but that's just normal for that type of species. Well, later on you have a human form, and it's the same kind of makeup, it's just different. It's a different makeup, but it's the same, arm, hands, heads, things like that. So the point is, whatever is going to come is going to be the same thing, but it's going to be even that much more refined, that much more beautiful, basically, and that much more godlike and in control. Probably a human that glows, that looks, ironically, closer to what the beginning ones look like. The beginning Polarian races, which basically look like ghosts, that could change their form and be any of the races in between, but they also couldn't interact physically because they lacked the density for that, and as well they lacked the necessity for it, because if you're eternal and you're the blueprint that everything comes from, what do you need? You don't need an Amazon Prime account, you already have everything that you need. And so, you don't need a car or anything like that. There's no reason, but it means that you literally can't give them a high five because they don't exist.
So based off of what you're saying, all of the stories of those going into this chasm, Olaf Jansen, Admiral Byrd, they experienced civilizations, houses, fields of agriculture, cities of gold, temples of music. Are you saying that this was more or less a sort of projection these Polarians were just entertaining for those who were experiencing it?
From our language, there's no answer, because it's saying, yes, they projected this illusion that was just as real as this world here to us. So it's not real? No, it's just as real, but then it's an illusion. Well, the illusion is real for us because we have a brain that's that big and we can't comprehend what it really means. So for us, their illusion is reality. We couldn't comprehend the totality of all of that's, occurring. It would be like the stories they have where they go in and they come back and it's like they were gone for 10 years because they experienced so much, but it was just like a quick, a second or an hour worth of experience, or a week or whatever it is, because we can't comprehend what that really. It doesn't translate. It translates, but there's information missing. It's like translating using an online translator from English into Japanese and then back to English. It kind of is just like broken language. It doesn't really make sense. That's the concept of the experience, to the point where they're not projecting for entertainment, but they're making it easy for these humans from the outer layer to comprehend existence on these inner layers, because it would honestly blow our minds. And there's stories where that happens, and it's like this technology, and basically they come back and they say they make our existence. They have machines and crystal generators.
My question would be, then, those of us who are planning to go to the centers, such as me and my team, how long would a projection of that sort continue until we are revealed the truth? Or are you simply saying everything there is just an etheric projection, and so once we're kind of comfortable in this realm, we will start to create just as creations are being displayed to us?
It's both. It could literally map out to the point where, just like some of the ancients describe, you get to the outer realm of this barrier, and because everybody was telepathic 1,000 years ago, and they're like, okay, I'm communicating with the internal civilization. They're telling me if I begin this journey, I'll have to do this and take this path. And they're like, I'm just going to sit here for a second and think about it. And they fall asleep, and they're welcomed into this, Agartha type revelation of reality by the founders of civilization and the human species. And they have this type of lifetime journey, and they wake up and it was just one single dream. But in the same sense, it was real because the people who led them there, who drew them up here, met them then in their dreams on the etheric plane. And but in the same sense, say you're there and you're realizing this is kind of projection, but you're working with it, and now to the point where you have translated the information of your consciousness and personality into this form, and you realize your energy now, and the body you were using is just a projection that your higher self was literally wearing, donning like a suit. And that what we call projection and reality is one and the same. And that it's not that you're now pretending that you're a body so that you can make sense of the situation. It's to the point where, say you activate your higher mind at that point, well, you split yourself up into 3 bodies, and one goes over there and talks to this group, and one goes over there, and you begin to basically manifest multitudes of realities in a simultaneity that bends the laws of what we conceive of as a physical and cognitive linearity and restriction, basically what we perceive as a restriction to reality, and you basically begin to introduce experiences that do not fit or belong into one single physical linear universe or life or time stream or spectrum of reality in this experience you're having, where you're now basically meeting another civilization, and it's because you're going through a kind of dimensional shift where it's basically where dreams, reality, mind, spirit, body, and energy, consciousness become one interplay, to the point where you can create a dream where you're now having the projection. The real question is, you're asking, well, what happens if there's no projection then? What happens if, say it is just a projection, which there's no just, this is a projection. What you can have in there is projections multiple times the intensity of this projection. But the idea is, what if it is kind of like just a projection, and then, well, okay, what happens if the projection goes away? Is there an underlying reality? Is it just energy? Is it just colors? Are there other bodies or something? And it's both one and the same, to the point where basically the polarian in the center is some type of strange, invisible, some weird Twilight-based reality where there's timelessness, and everything is done telepathically, meaning you really don't even have to move in order to do anything. And apparently everyone in civilization is literally in that place right now. And we fell asleep and projected ourselves out into the borderlands, the outer boundaries where information travels and it gets degraded and noise is introduced along with the signal, to the point where there's a high noise to signal ratio. And in this realm we have suffering and pain and horror, and basically it keeps things interesting. And every so often we go out here, then we go back and we repeat the process and we learn, and it's literally like a universe breathing and growing more organized with each breath that it takes, and stronger and more powerful. And but that's the point, that it's a combination of real and physical and projection and reality and consciousness. It's the actual reality, they're not separate, they're one and the same. And so each layer up we go, we begin to basically have a breakdown of consciousness in the fact of perception, the barrier between one and the other. And that's where people go insane, where you see people who were dead to you for the entirety of your existence. Your dreams, your mind becomes awake while you're walking, while you're alive and awake. You don't need food anymore because you're pulling energy out of the flux in the air. Aging and unconsciousness, memory, everything begins to alter and change in a massive spectrum, to the point where you're basically, it's like a dream world. Alice in Wonderland, what do you think that was about? Why do you think that guy was a Freemason, or the original people? And what do you think everyone else was that had anything to do with that?
Right, it was a projection of Alice's worst fears.
It was a human fear. It was the brain traveling through the brain and the body and trying to navigate across polarity until the false authority, the ego, no longer strikes fear, and one can stand up. Their true self stands up to the false authority.
You said earlier that perhaps we'd be able to, once we're in this realm, to split ourselves up into multiple bodies. And in literature on the Polarian race, they divide, they reproduce like an amoeba.
Apparently that's how things work in the inner society. There's not death and reproduction, but this basically, they called it, when they explained it to us, they called it cloning. That it's the same thing with tech, only they don't use tech, they use their minds and literally clone themselves. Which is weird, but that's how it was explained. And, I've had experiences, but the experiences of the inner realm are usually not allowed to leave, and you just get these dreamlike glimpses that are like degraded. It would be like if Alice in Wonderland, the story, was rewritten as a girl fell down a hole, hit her head, met a talking rabbit, and woke up. Like if that's how it was degraded, that's how the information, when you have an experience there and you get back out here, that's how it seems. It degrades, and all the good stuff, all the richness stays over there. Like it can't exist in this place. But it's basically the easiest way to understand it is that all the limitations we experience here, the restrictions on experience, the time, having to upkeep the body, the stuff in society that holds us back, none of that applies over there. You don't have to. And as well, it's used to maintain continuity of experience here, as well as holding people back, if you want to call it that. The people who do it so they can have all their pleasure and nastiness and stuff, they're using it to hold people back. The people who are trying to stop wars from breaking out, they're doing it to keep things continuous. And the two are kind of like working together at an offset, at an odds with each other to protect this species. One's protecting, one's trying to basically control it so that they don't go anywhere, because they like it just the way it is now. One's trying to stop that from degrading. One's stopping them from advancing forward, one's stopping them from falling back and degrading. It's a really weird way to look at it, but it's like a reverse tug of war where they're pulling this way and it's actually around a pulley that's pulling that way, and they're pulling this way and it's actually around a pulley that's pulling that way. So it's really weird, but it's set up that way.
But the beginning of the end of that tug of war is, like you said, when just one person decides to take that journey to the center.
In any way, but that's the direct way. If everyone stood up here and said, stop playing the tug of war, they'd have to stop. Because it's like the borderlands and the domain, the right to domain that you talked about. Same thing. They have outer domain because that's what they aligned with. Nobody can stop people from accessing the inner domain, and because they don't have domain over that, they don't have right, it's the other civilization that has right over that. And so if everyone stood up here and said stop doing that, then it would have to stop. But because that's not going to happen, now someone has to basically kind of take it as a manual movement or operation, and they have to basically break the veil and introduce reality, truth into this system, this reality that can't be hidden, and they don't have a right to hide it. They can confuse everyone all they want, but if somebody breaks the veil, then that's that.
No consent, no dominion.
That's the one thing they can't have. As for those who want to stop people from advancing, and who are getting away with it by saying, well, we're not stopping you from advancing, we're helping you overcome your fear and your problems, or whatever. But the idea is they can't stop somebody from actually exposing the system as a complete fraud if it has to do with the inner system that they don't have domain over. You can't go into a courthouse and be like, this is a travesty, and flip the table, and they're going to fucking tase that person and put him in jail. But they can't stop you from going to the source of reality and introducing the truth into this realm in a way that hasn't been done in thousands of years. They don't have domain. It's the same as if you turned into light and flew over the town, but over here they suck up the energy right out of the air, right out of the electrically charged etheric medium that everyone is in, and suck up everybody's energy, and they can see what's going to happen ahead of time. So they have domain over this place and the future of this place. It's like completely locked down. But if people introduce the original, situation, and basically if they introduce aspects that are outside of their bounds, then they can't do anything. Which is as well as saying what's within you. If you sing songs and tell people about what's within you, if you crack your own consciousness barriers and write books or tell people, that can't be stopped. But the point is, it's going to get to a point where it's so locked down, only one thing is going to actually change everything, and that's going to be a parallel of somebody altering everything, and then an eventual mass exodus of a mass awakening, basically. All right, well, thank you for listening, everybody. I might chop that part off, I don't know, but thank you.